People are busy. I don't know. Okay, I think we will get started. It's a sicha in Chelik Yudches. Look at the sichas. Second sicha for the parsha. This is part of the project. Look at the sichas. One of the two sichas that everybody's learning this week. Chazal tell us, Loma nismach parshas Nozir el parsha Seita. Why in the Torah is the parshas Nozir written next to the parsha of Seita? Further, Torah tells us the laws of a Seita. We all know what the laws of a Seita is. If the husband warned his wife not to go into hiding with a certain man and she didn't listen, so then there's a whole procedure. You have to take her to Beis Hamikdash and she drinks water, and you write the Megillah and you raise the Megillah into the water, etc., and she drinks. And if she's innocent, she'll not only have a bracha, but if she's guilty, then she's going to die a certain way, the Torah says. And after that, the Torah goes into the dinim of a Nazir. Nazir is somebody who makes a neder that he's not going to drink wine, not going to be tamal mesim, etc., etc. So Chazal tell us in brachas, why did the Torah write the parsha of Nazir next to the parsha of Seita? Leimer noch to tell you, shekol areya Seita b'kilkulo. If someone sees a Seita when she is in her kilkul, in her bad situation, yazer atzmin hayayin, he should separate himself from wine, which means that we suspect this woman as doing adultery, and a lot of these things happen through drinking wine. So if you see the kilkul of the Seita, then you should take upon yourself to become a nazir and not drink wine. For the same reason, the inyan of Seita and the inyan of Nazir are close to each other in Torah Shabbat Peh, which means Mesichta Seita kommt gleich nach Mesichta Nazir. In Mishnais and the Gemara, Mesichta Seita comes right after Mesichta Nazir. Again, here we see that they're close to each other. And it's for the same reason. The Gemara sagt in the Mesichta Seita, like the Gemara says in the beginning of Seita, the Gemara says, Tana min Nazir Salik. The Tana, who's writing the Mishnais of Seita, is coming right after Nazir. My Tana de Katana Seita. What did he say before that? Right after that, he's telling us about the Seita. And the answer is Rebbe, like Rebbe said. Why is the parsha of Nazir in the Torah close to the parsha of Seita? For the same thing, anybody who sees a Seita in her in her kilkul should separate himself from wine. So we see with the same logic that we're using, why in the Torah Nazir and Seita are close to each other. The same thing is also in the Mishnayos. Why the Mishnayos and Seita are close to each other? That Seita comes after Nazir. The Rambam beschreibt, the Rambam in his introduction to Pirush HaMishnayos, he writes, as Mesichta Seita kum gleich noch Mesichta Gittin. He says the order is different. Seita comes after Gittin. And Nazir kommt vor Gittin, and Nazir is before Gittin. And the reason, what's the connection, he says, between Seita and Gittin? Gittin is divorce. Shenyana, the Mesichta Seita, minyan hagerishin. Because the inyan of Mesichta Seita has to do with divorce. Shal Seita, keshedizane, if the Seita, this woman who is a Seita, actually was mezane, which means she was behaved immorally, she committed adultery, yeshloku vayish al hagerishin. You have to force him, the man and the woman, to get divorced. So we see the connection between Seita and divorce. That's why Seita is right after Gittin, which talks about divorce. But then the question is, that's not like the Gemara. The Gemara gives a different reason. Rambam can't say different than the Gemara. Also, the Gemara is okenal tone tanem and nozik salik. My tone the katana seita shkolarei seita yozer atzmi. We quoted before that the Gemara itself gives a reason why is seita right next to Nazir. Because if you see a seita, you should separate yourself, make yourself a Nazir separated from wine. So the Gemara says it. How could the Rambam give a different reason? He says, "With the Meiri is masbi." So the Meiri, one of the Rishonim, explains, "Val Gittin v'Seita l'inyan ze echadheim." Seita and Gittin are one inyan. Shesibes hagerish shebesibes hakilkul. What's the reason why a person would divorce his wife? Because she spoiled it. She did what she wasn't allowed to do. So really, Seita and Gittin go together. V'nismecha Gittin v'Seita l'nozir. So Gittin and Seita are close to Nozir. So really, Seita is next to Gittin, but Gittin itself is. Gittin is next to Seita, and Nazir is right before that, because the inyan of Seita and Gittin is like one thing. Then the next word is not clear. The Rebbe says maybe it means lemedrash or drash, shakilko abom and sabayayin geirim Gittin v'Seita. That what the Gemara means to say that because you drink wine, that could bring a person to Gittin and Saita. So Gittin and Saita go together, and they're close to Nozir because of the Nozir. If you see what happens to a Saita, as the Gemara says, which could bring to a get, you should separate yourself from the wine. But Lapel Mamish, the Mesichta Saita, is not after Nozir, but it's after Gittin. Not like we have in our way, in the print, in the Mishnais, and the way the Gemara seems from the Gemara, not seems, the Gemara says clearly that Saita and Nozir go together, but the Rambam says not. And what the Gemara meant Saita and Gittin go as one thing, and that's close to Nozir. Davon verstehen, so the Rebbe says we have to understand. Die Baldas in Teresh B'Ksav kommen die zwei Parshas von Saita und Nozir gleich bis Micha selber. Since in Chumash, in Teresh B'Ksav, Saita and Nozir come next to each other, actually next to each other. Favosel the Teresh B'Alpeh. So why in the Mishnayos, which is Teresh B'Alpeh, wo die Smichas Mesichta Nozir zu Gittin und Saita, means at demselben time wie in Teresh B'Ksav, there the connection between Saita and Nozir is for the same reason as in Chumash, Zaina Hefsek zwischen sie. Why over there should it be with the separation of Mesichta Gittin? According to the Rambam, the idea is that Saita should be next to Nozir, but nevertheless, there is Mesichta Gittin in the middle. So according to the Rambam, Saita comes after Gittin, Gittin comes after Nozir. So Nozir is close to Gittin and Saita, as we said before, that they're like one thing. But Lapela, it's not the same as in Chumash. In Chumash, we see clearly Saita and Nozir mamish next to each other, and in Teresh B'Alpeh, according to the Rambam, in Mishnayos, it's Saita and Nozir, but in the middle you have Gittin. We also have to understand, was Boris Haplukte, sie Saita kommt gleich noch Nozir, wie Rashi ist mefarish, wie Pashtas Loshon HaGemara, oder noch Mesichta Gittin Kshitas Rambam. Besides the question we asked before, why should it be different? What is the logic behind the argument between Rashi? Rashi learns that Saita and Nozir go next to each other. And that's mashma from the simple words of the Gemara. Why is Nozir next to Saita? So what's the reason for that opinion? And what's the reason for the other opinion, the Rambam's opinion, that Gittin is in between, that Saita really is next to Gittin? There are Mefarshim brings the Ma'im Chaim, the Pichodesh, explain, but they learn, the Rambam gate L'Shitas Yerushalmi. The reason the Rambam holds that Saita is next to Gittin, that goes according to the Yerushalmi. According to Yerushalmi, the fact that a person warns his wife not to go into hiding with this man, which is the whole basis of a Saita. A Saita could only become a Saita if the husband warns her and says, do not go into hiding with this man. So he says that this inyan of warning is connected to get. But the Far Halter has Mesichta Saita kum noch Gittin. That's why he says Mesichta Saita comes right after Gittin, because Gittin and Saita have a very close connection. That's why it comes out from Yerushalmi, and that's why the Rambam learns like that. So he follows the Yerushalmi. What do we see in Yerushalmi? In Yerushalmi state, it says in Yerushalmi, as he plukte zwischen Rabbi Leib and Rabbi Yeshua dort. Zikinu l'ishe zacheva der Reshus. There in Yerushalmi brings a machlekes between these two people, Rabbi Leib and Rabbi Yeshua. This, that the husband could warn his wife not to go into hiding, and that turns into a Saita, is an obligation for the husband to do that, or it's just that he has permission to do it. He's allowed to do it. So the Yerushalmi says that the argument between these two, which one it is it an obligation or just that it's allowed, is totally in the plukta from B'Shamai B'Sila. That depends on an argument between B'Shamai B'Sila, the Mishnah Seif Gittin, and the Mishnah at the end of Gittin. What's the argument there? See, the Das B'Shamai, the Igara Shodah Masishta Linke Motzah Ervo. The Shammai holds that a person is not allowed to divorce his wife unless he finds some immoral behavior. Or the Vizhila says no, even if she spoiled his food, she burned the food, he's allowed to divorce her. So B'Shamai says you're not allowed to divorce a wife normally unless there's some Dvar Erbe, which is some misbehavior and immoral behavior, and according to B'Zhila, you could. So therefore, he says like this: what happens if a husband finds not moral things done by his wife, but there are no witnesses? If there are witnesses, you follow what the witnesses say. If they say she did something, then you punish her, whatever. What happens? He knows she did bad things, but there are no witnesses, so he can't prosecute her, so to speak. He's late by Shammai. So according to Shammai, you have a problem. Shammai, you're not allowed to divorce your wife just like that. So the Garsha in the Yochel, you can't divorce her. He didn't find any moral thing, because if there's no witnesses, you can't say that you really found something immoral. The Kaime in the Yochel, to keep her, you can't. Because he found immoral things there, so you can't keep her. So what do? He said, so that makes him obligated to warn her. That if he warns her, then she goes through the process of a Saita, and then you find out, you verify whether she's guilty or not. So according to the Bishamai, there's a reason to say that there's a chiyuv to the mekana her, to warn her. In a case like this, there's a chiyuv to warn her because you can't divorce her, you can't keep her. So the only way to do it is to warn her. But that's only according to Bishamai. Mashenkeli Bezilo, but according to Bezilo, as mutter legara you're allowed to divorce even if she spoiled his food. Is kina b'leizar shoes to warn her and turn into a seita is only that you're allowed to do it. But it's not an obligation to do. Why? Because there is another choice, another option. By the hodi breida to give me a get, he can give her a get. See, according to Bisham, he can't give her a get because he has no proof that she did something immoral. So he can't give her a get. So the only way to do it is there's a mitzvah to warn her. But according to Basil, there's no mitzvah to warn her. If she is in a situation like this, that she did something wrong and we don't have edim, you could divorce her. Don't. If you want to, there's a reshus, there's a permission to mekana her, to warn her. Tosfos brings them. The Rebbe is not finished yet. Tosfos brings this Yerushalmi. Tosfos and Seitat of Gimel brings this Yerushalmi. Tosfos asks the question: the Fiyah Yerushalmi, according to Yerushalmi, keeping the Tal Yekina Begedish, and since we said the warning of the woman to make her into a Seita depends on, it's connected to divorce. So Seita should have come right after Gittin, because a Seita happens when you know the dinim of get, then you can make a Seita. So l'chora it should. Why is it that Seita comes after Nazir? Why doesn't Seita come after Gittin? That's Tosfos Kasha according to the Yerushalmi, that Yerushalmi says that the union of Seita is connected to get. So the Mefarshim and also, this is what the Mefarshim come in and say, at late in Yerushalmi that the Rambam learns that according to Yerushalmi it's stuck like that. A Seita kommt noch Gittin. According to Yerushalmi, Seita is after Gittin. Because Seita is very close connected to Gittin, to a get, according to the Yerushalmi. And the Rambam learned for the Yerushalmi, and the Rambam learns like the Yerushalmi. So the question before we asked, why does the Rambam learn that Seita comes after Gittin, not after Nazir, like it says by us? Because the Rambam learned the Yerushalmi, and Yerushalmi it comes out as connected to Gittin, and the Yerushalmi and the Rambam Parskas like the Yerushalmi. But the Teretz is sure that this Teretz is hard to accept. Since in Bavli, in our Gemara, which is Bavli, we don't find this concept that the union of Seita, which is the kinui, the warning of the Seita, is connected to a get. We don't find it. And not only we don't find it, this is Eich Mucher from them will prove it also. Not only we don't find that he says it. That's true. We don't find anywhere where the Yerushalmi connects it. Next kinui, the warning by a Seita to a get, we don't find it in Bavli. But besides that, you could even prove it, he says. In Bavli bringt sich dieselbe Pluk der Zikinu is Chever Rishus. In Bavli, it does bring an argument whether the fact that the husband warns his wife is an obligation, a must, or just a permission. Nor the Chelkin Zayin Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, who are arguing in Yerushalmi. The two people who argue is Rabbi Leib and Rabbi Yeshua. In Bavli, the argument is between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva says Chayv it's an obligation, or Rabbi Shmuel says it's a reshus. It's not an obligation. Or Rabbi Akiva holds as memeg megadas and anisha filamot sacheres no emenu. Rabbi Akiva goes even further than Basil. Basil says you could even divorce her if she spoiled your food, and Rabbi Akiva says you could divorce her even if you just found another one, a nicer one. So according to Rabbi Akiva, you are allowed to divorce your wife. So according to the Rabbi Akiva, you can't say that Seita is a must, and that's why it's connected, because otherwise you can't give a divorce. According to Rabbi Akiva, you could give a get. So comes out, according to the Bavli, the union of Seita is not a continuation to what it says at the end of Gittin that Bishamai holds that you're not allowed to divorce your wife. See, according to the Yerushalmi, it's a connection, because the Yerushalmi says that the fact that you have to mekana your wife is because you can't give her a get. Because it goes because according to Bishamai. But in Bavli it doesn't say that, because the one that says that it's an obligation to do it, it happens to be Rabbi Akiva, who doesn't hold that you're not allowed to divorce your wife. So why? So there's no connection. So how do we have to learn according to the Bavli? Since there is no connection between Seita and a get, so it doesn't come after Gittin. So according to the Bavli, like it says in simple Gemara, that Seita comes after Nazir. Heinz, wie kann man sagen, der Rambam nimmt on Shittas HaYerushalmi and legt Shittas HaBavli. Elamai, according to Yerushalmi, it is like that. And we're saying the Rambam will hold like Yerushalmi. But since Bavli clearly is not like that, according to the Bavli, it's not connected. The fact that you are obligated, according to this opinion, you're obligated to warn your wife and make her into a Seita is not connected to a get. So you can't say the reason of why that Seita comes after Gittin. And usually when there's a machlokes between Bavli and Yerushalmi, we paskin like the Bavli. So here we have, according to Yerushalmi, very possible that according to the way Yerushalmi learns, Take, Gittin, Seita has to come after Gittin, but not according to the Bavli. So how could we say that the Rambam says that Seita comes after Gittin because he goes according to Yerushalmi? It's against the Bavli. Nochmer, the question is further. If the Rambam then told Yerushalmi, as Chavis Akinu is told the Begerishn, if we're going to accept that the Rambam goes according to the Yerushalmi, that the obligation to warn your wife is connected, is dependent on the concept of a get, the paskin to be Rabbi Akiva as Kinu is a chayva. So how could he say, according to like Rabbi Akiva, that to warn your wife is an obligation, was late in Yerushalmi and now there's beheset shittas b'shamai. According to Yerushalmi, why is there an obligation to make her into a seita, to warn her? Because there's no choice. According to B'Shamai, there is no choice because it's an obligation to, since you can't divorce her according to B'Shamai, so there's no other choice but to warn her. But according to Yerushalmi, who is of opinion that it's an obligation to warn her? B'Shamai. Because if we're connecting the two, that means that the reason you're obligated to warn her is because you cannot divorce her. That means that who is the one that says that you must warn her? B'Shamai. Because B'Shamai are the ones that hold that you can't give her a divorce, so maybe there's no choice but to warn her. And according to the Rambam, if he follows like the Yerushalmi, then in Yerushalmi it says that this is according to B'Shamai. See, in Bavli, it doesn't say it's according to B'Shamai. Bavli doesn't connect the fact that you have an obligation to warn her, to make her into Seita to the union of a get. So it's nothing to do with B'Shamai. But if the Rambam holds like the Yerushalmi, then it has to do with the fact that you have to give her a get because that's what B'Shamai holds. The Rambam paskins that it's an obligation to give a get, to give kinui. And that's connected according to Yerushalmi with B'Shamai. That means that the Rambam paskins like B'Shamai. We know we never paskin like B'Shamai. So the question is, why does the Rambam learn that Seita comes after Gittin, not after Nazir? And what's the reason for the machlokes, which way it is? Let's first understand the Rebbe says, Rambam, as we said before, paskins that it's an obligation to warn her and to make her into a seita. That's the halacha. The l'chura, first glance, the Gemara is medayik b'loshen HaMishnah, is going to prove l'chura that it's not so, because it says in the Mishnah, the seita mekane l'ishtei, the Mishnah starts off, if somebody warns his wife, etc., etc., etc. The Gemara asks on the loshen of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if somebody is mekane, which means warns his wife, then this is the din. So it's mashma, if it happened, the Eved ein lechatchila lei means, but the Eved, if you warned her, there are certain dinim how to follow, whole procedure. But there's mashma lechatchila, you shouldn't warn her. Because sover tani the don, yes, so that the Gemara says that the Mishnah, which says if you warned her, the din is so and so, this Tana holds, osur lekan is that you're not allowed to warn her. Which means we have two opinions before we said whether it's a obligation to warn or just you're allowed to warn. Here the Mishnah holds you're not allowed to b'chlal warn. It's a isur. So now the question is, Vibald as late stam Mishnah is also lekana. Since the Mishnah, the first Mishnah doesn't have a name. It's called a stam Mishnah. Stam Mishnah, when there's halacha in the Mishnah, it just says a halacha. Always the halacha is like a stam Mishnah. Here the Mishnah says, if you warned her, so and so happens. Which means that the Mishnah, Tan of the Mishnah holds that you're not allowed to warn her. Only if you warned her, you go out, you go ahead with the process. So you're not allowed to warn her. So it comes out that according to the Stam Mishnah is also lekanes. You're not allowed to warn. For was paskin to be Rabbi Akiva? So why does the Rambam paskin like Rabbi Akiva? Was sein Deye ber gebrach blazen na Breise. The fact that Rabbi Akiva holds that you're allowed to, you're obligated to warn is in a Breise. So we have a Breise where it says that Rabbi Akiva holds that you're obligated to warn her. We have a Stam Mishnah which says you're not allowed to warn her. So how do you paskin? Your klal is doch stoma de masnissen. Umachleikes bebreise halacha kistam. If you have a Mishnah that has no name and it has a halacha, but then you have a Breise that has a different opinion. The klal is, the rule is the halacha is like the Mishnah. So in this case, the halacha should be like the Stam Mishnah that you're not allowed to warn her. So how does the Rambam say that it's a chayva to warn her? The Taisus Yontif then, the Taisus Yontif answers this kasha. He says like this: Bald asayre bakivim sayre Yishmol in the Breise halt mazlavi suruhu. Now, since we said before that in Bavli, whether it's an obligation to warn her or only a reshus, is a machlekes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. But the Tosfos Yonta says, but according to both, it's not like the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, it says you're not allowed to warn her. Here we have two opinions, whether you have to or you're allowed to. But it's different than the Mishnah. In a case like this, we're in the Braisa, we have two opinions against the Mishnah. We don't pass like the Mishnah. And we come to the rule that Allah is Rabbi Akiva. If Rabbi Akiva argues with another Tana, Allah is Rabbi Akiva, and we disregard the fact that in the Mishnah, Stam Mishnah is that you're not allowed to, because here we have a Braisa, which is of two Tanoim, which is different than the Mishnah. But the Rebbe says that Teretz is over nor later the day is that Teretz only fits according to these opinions as Alocha ki Stam Mishnah lagaba Braisa gate niton and afal, but the Stam Mishnah is adas yochid. See, there's an argument that when we say that Alocha is like a Stam Mishnah, even though there's a Braisa says differently, so there's one opinion that says that this Halacha Stam Mishnah does not apply in a case where the Stam Mishnah is an opinion of one person. And then it would fit what the Tosfos Yonta says. The Mishnah is one person. In the Braisa, we have two people. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel, both hold that it's not Osir. The argument is whether it's a Chayva or a Rishus, but it's not Osir. And the Mishnah, which is Osir's own opinion. So if we hold that in a case like this, we don't pass him like the Stam Mishnah, then fine, the Tosfos Yonta's answer is very good. So in this case, we pass. That's what the Rama paskins like, not like the Stam Mishnah, because the halacha is not like the Stam Mishnah. According to the opinions that halacha is Stam Mishnah, even if we find different opinions in the Braisa, we still pass like the Mishnah. The kasha comes back. How in the world did the Rambam paskin that it's a chayva when it's against the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says that it's osir? How could the Rambam paskin the chayva? This is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, but the Stam Mishnah says osir, and the halacha is all like Stam Mishnah. Yeah, Shleimer, so the Rebbe comes up with an interesting answer. This is a whole nigla, whole pilpul, whole nigla pul. Yeah, Shleimer, as das Rambam is nicht talking drein dike machlekes binyan akinoi. According to the Rambam, there's no three-way machlekes here. Till now, we're saying three-way machlekes. Osir, the Tana of the Mishnah says osir. Then there is an opinion says reshus, an opinion or the chayva. So then the Mishnah is a different opinion than the other two. So if you say chayva, it's different than the Mishnah. So the question is, how could you pass him different than the Mishnah? But he holds no. The Rambam holds that there's no three opinions. By Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva, the Braisa, Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva, that's in the Braisa. So I need mechulik mit the Tana from the Mishnah as also lakanas. They're not arguing. The Tana says it's osir. It's true. They agree it's osir. They're talking about a different situation. And then he's going to prove it also. He says, from them, I can prove it, the Rebbe says, from this, but the Gemara bringt nicht die Braise gleich noch medayik seine Kesovertanya den Nosel Bikanis. The Gemara did like this. The Mishnah said, if you were Mekana, your wife, etc., etc. Comes the Gemara and is medayik. It's mashman that she's osir. Because it says, if you were Mekana, but yeah, not. And the Gemara asks, and the Gemara says, yes, and the Tano holds that it's osir. The Gemara didn't come right away and say, well, this is against the Braisa. If the Braisa is an argument against the Mishnah says osir, and the Braisa says two opinions, Reshus or Chayva, but definitely arguing osir, then why didn't the Gemara say it right away? Al derech with the Gemara bringt in the Geide Deis for Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yeshua in the Mishnah, Mekana lo Pishnayim. The Gemara says a different point, that from the Mishnah we see different than Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yeshua. In the Mishnah it says that in order to warn her, you have to have with two witnesses. And the Gemara says right away that that's what the Mishnah says, but it's not what Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yeshua say in the Braisa. No, in the Mishnah they say Mekan Shnaim as Masnis like Yaitana. The Gemara says that this Mishnah does not fit to a different opinion, which Rabbi Yeshua Mekan al Piyadech al Piyatzmei. The Gemara right away makes the point that the Tana of the Mishnah says you have to have two Eidim, and there's a Braisa that says you don't. So right away the Gemara makes a point. So the Gemara doesn't right away say another thing, that the Mishnah says it's osir, and we have a Braisa which two opinions that it's not osir. Und bringt es nicht afilo bekeshet to the day of Fontana de Nazos of the Gemara brings this Braisa later, not even in connection to the din of the Mishnah, which seems to say that it's osir to warn her. What does that prove? That this is not a kind of machlekes. If the Braisa would be a machlekes, the Gemara would have brought it right away. The Mishnah seems to say osir, and here we have a Braisa that's not. The Braisa wird gebracht in Gemara place wie Eichoche, ados was Toner bei Yishmael zok. The Gemara brings this Braisa, the machlekes, whether it's a reshus or a chayva. But concerning something else, Gemara wants to prove That's what it says in the name of Rabbi Shmuel that Eino the Mekana Lishta is Beruach. The person should not be Mekana his wife, warn his wife, unless a spirit came in. And there is a question in Gemara, what does it mean, a good spirit or a bad spirit? So the Gemara wants to prove, for the Mandama Ruach Tara. The Gemara wants to prove that it goes according to the opinion that says it's a good, a toidik, a pure Ruach. The Amret Ruach Tumah, if you're going to say to warn her, is that Ruach Tumah is bad, Rashus v'chayved liyula inish Ruach Tumah v'nafshay. So how could there be a machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel? The Gemara says, whether you have to or you're allowed to, if it means Ruach Tumah, then obviously you can't do it. You can't say that it's a chayva or even a reshus to bring Ruach Tumah. So the Gabevad, the Gemara brings these two opinions. But the Gemara doesn't bring it as a stira, so to speak, to the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says Osir, and here we have two opinions that it's not Osir. So what does that prove? That the Mishnah is not talking, it's not an argument. What they two say, whether it's chayva or reshus, is not arguing against the Mishnah. Nor the Mishnah and Bryce reden wegen zwei verschiedene Fallen. The Mishnah and the Bryce, it's a Chiddush of the Rebbe, talking about two separate cases, and they're not arguing. When the Mishnah says it's also it's a one case. When they say it's a chayva or a reshus, is another case, and they admit that in the case of the Mishnah, that case, as we'll explain, is take osir. The Mishnah will agree that in the other case is not osir. What is it? In Kino is eine Veranzweihe, when the husband warns his wife, there are two ways to go about it. Two situations, not ways, two situations. Number one, a warning comes to a woman that's not modest, and is a hagdama to the stira, and that's an introduction to her hiding. She's a woman that's immoral. She does things which she shouldn't. She goes hiding with people, and that's the warning is an introduction. Don't hide. If you hide, you'll be in trouble. That's the one way. When will he warn her? When he finds, as the expression of the Yerushalmi, he found immoral behavior in her. And the husband suspects her in doing some adultery, not he said, so he's warning his wife, so he's going to be able to verify if she will not listen to his warning and she will go into hiding, he'll be able to verify whether she's guilty or not guilty, whether she became Tomei, which means she's guilty or she's not guilty. So one way a person could be Mekana his wife is if he sees some immoral behavior and he's doing it because he's suspecting her and who knows what. The second way is different, the opposite. To warn a very fine kosher woman. The Rambam says, the Rambam says, when you warn your wife, you have to do it calmly, in the pure way, and a warning in order to guide her, to take away a possible stumbling block. Anybody who doesn't care about his wife and his sons and children and his household, and he doesn't constantly warn her and look into their ways, he's a sinner. In other words, you always, in normal circumstances, not because you suspect your wife, normal circumstances, you have to always make sure to warn your wife and warn the family to make sure they go good. But from them is mucha, from that we understand, as chayves akino is not verbunden mit dem, was der Baal is cheshadish in advar avera. That the idea of the obligation to warn her is not because he's suspecting her in doing an avera. Or he saw her immoral behavior and therefore he assumes there's something wrong there. It's a detail in the general idea that a person has to train and guide and educate his family, educate his wife. Just like you have to care and educate your children, your whole family. So here too. So she's not a woman that's suspected in doing an avera. So there's two types of kinui. But the fire is mitzvah chachamim abnei yisrael lekanis l'sheim. That's why it's a mitzvah. The Rambam says it's a mitzvah. The chachamim said it's a mitzvah to warn the wives. Bechlal doesn't say to a woman who's suspected. So yeder isha, to all wives, all women. Unal tzanoget mitzvah. The washing stomach. Constantly, you have to do it. Now, with the bavorin, you have to always remember. Don't do it too much. Don't go extreme. Not in a laughter way. Don't scare her. Don't jump and warn her in front of Eidim. You have to be very careful how you do it, but it has nothing to do with suspecting the woman. So there are two ways of kinoi. And those are the chiluk between the Mishnah and the Braisa. Those are the two situations, the difference in the Mishnah and the Braisa. In Mishnah, where zokt hamekane, the Mishnah where it says, if you or makana your wife, etc., etc. B'di'evet. That's talking about a woman that you found immoral behavior. But this is the introduction to her, maybe going into hiding with a man. And in them, how the Rambam as Lashitas Abablis also lekanis. As he'll explain later, the Rambam Taka says you're not allowed to be mekana. In such a way, you shouldn't be mekana. You shouldn't warn her. We'll see later why. At first glance, you would think the opposite. If he knows that she's doing bad things, certainly should warn her. No, the Rebbe will explain. But he says, I'll tell you later. I'm not telling you, but I'm just telling you that the Rambam is talking about that it's a mitzvah. He said mitzvah chachamim. That's not that case. When he says in the Mishnah also that also lekana, it says if you warned her, but it means you shouldn't have warned her. It's also the Rambam learns this isn't a case where she behaved immoral, and that's what the Mishnah is talking about. But in the Braisa, when there's an argument with Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, whether the warning is an obligation or a reshus, that's the second case. A woman that's fine, and you want to just train her, so you say these things in a nice way. That's what they argue, whether it's a mitzvah or you're able to do it. Rabbi Shmuel held that the ganze inyan akino by nishik sheira is blazer shoes. Rabbi Shmuel says this whole idea of warning, even by an ishak sheira, is only a reshus. You don't have to do it, but you could do it if you want to. It's a chidush and a sinaseter. It's a chidush that you could do it. You might think you shouldn't. And the idea is the Torah allows you to, even a regular kosher woman, that you're able to warn her. Why would we think you shouldn't, that you need a special heter? Because the Torah says, don't hate your brother. In other words, another yid in your heart. So you would think that you can't warn her. That shows like you're having an opposite of Abbas Yisrael to the wife. Zok Torah, in them fall. Torah says in this case, Choj the Kinu can bring it to Tagevisina, even though if you warn her, could bring to arguments, could bring to hatred, she'll be upset. Meg sein da Noge from Kinesishte. So Rabbi Shmuel says you're allowed to. Torah made it allowed because it's going to be good for the behavior, etc., etc. But Rabbi Akiva, as the Kinu was complete, he says that this warning that comes to a woman just to train her, to educate her, not because she's bad, is an obligation to do. Nazei pasken the Rambam canal. The Rambam paskens like that. We said before that the Rambam is talking about such a case. We said before Siv Dalet that the Rambam is talking in a case when he gives all the details that you should do it to train your wife, etc., etc. So he's talking about that case, and there Itaka says it's a mitzvah. So the Rambam paskens it's a chayva. So the whole obligation, the argument of Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is when she's a ishak sheira, and you want to just educate her. And if that gufa, the Rambam paskens is like Rabbi Akiva. It's a mitzvah, it's a chayva, it's an obligation to do it. But that's not what the Mishnah was talking about. When the Mishnah said it's osir, it's talking about a woman who did dvorim uchorim, did things which are not nice. So the pale, now the Rebbe said there are two types of kinui, and that's the Mishnah and the Braisa. Now the Rebbe adds in brackets, these two types of the way a person is going to warn the wife, whether it's because she did something wrong or because he's training her, educating her, both of them are hinted in the Pasuk. The Pasuk starts off like this. If a person, Pasuk says, if a person will have a spirit of warning and will warn his wife and she is Tomei, or he will have this spirit of Kino and he will warn his wife and she's not Tomei. The Arichas in Kefal Alosh, the Pasuk is very long here. It says double. He said already, if a person warns his wife because he doesn't know if she's Tomei or not. So I should have said that. A person warns his wife if she's Tomei, in other words, to see if she's Tomei. The Pasuk repeats it. He warns his wife if she's Tomei, or he has a ruach to warn his wife and she's not Tomei. Is merames. That is a remes as das retzich wegen zwei verschiedene Suge Noshim. There are two kinds here, two categories of women. First one is v'kines ishte nitmo. He warns his wife, the Pasuk says, and she's Tomei, meaning that he's warning his wife that he found not nice things by her, which means he doesn't know for sure that she's guilty 100% of the Aveire, but it's something that indicates. As his mer korev leimer as itmo. The Pasuk says it sounds like it's very close to say it's very possible or probable that she did. That's what the Pasuk says. He's warning her because he nitmo. Very possible she's nitmo. And then the Pasuk continues, or the bikina sish nitmo. He warned her and she wasn't tamei. That tells you that you could warn your wife when she's not tamei, just to educate her. So this is just to add to the point that we do see in the posik two types of kinuya for the wife. Okay. Now the Rebbe is going to explain. We said before that when the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to warn her, only b'diavad. If you did it, then we tell you the halacha is a case where he found by her immoral things. So, why should there be an isur? Why we say that's when you're not allowed? Because he found bad things by her. Okay, there are things like that. It should be on the contrary. If you saw things in her, you should definitely warn her. It might bring to argument. True, but you got to warn her. To make sure that in the future she doesn't do any averes. And since you suspect her, you have to verify to find out if she's sintake. So it makes more sense that here should be more obligation. Why do we say here it's more svara? Why here we learn that it's not allowed? The emphasis like this. According to the Rambam, you could say the reason why you're not allowed to warn. What's the reason you're not allowed to warn? So Rasha says the reason it's not to warn, the way Rasha learns, is because warning your wife, don't go into hiding with this person, brings argument. For sure, she'll be upset and she'll argue. That's the reason you shouldn't. That's osir. The Rambam doesn't learn. Not like Rasha because it brings the argument. For a different reason, he says it's osir. In this case, where he found immoral things, there's a possibility that the water won't work. The whole idea of making it to a saita, so you'll take her to Beis Hamikdash, she'll drink the water, and that'll verify if she'll die or not. If you suspect that she's immoral, then the water might not even work. Kiddulah comment. As the Rebbe says, I'm not going to explain. This is what he explains. The din is, the halach is like this. If the husband is clean, if the husband is not guilty of a similar type of avera, then she's the only one that is guilty, or the one that we suspect. So then, if she's guilty, the water will work, and she will die. If the husband himself is not clean, that means he is also guilty of similar avera. The water will not work on the wife. If he ever had relations with a woman, even if it wasn't a relative or a married woman, even with a single woman, if he ever did that, the water won't work on her in this case. What does it mean if he's not clean from avera? So the Rambam says that he once had a forbidden relation after he was already an adult. Even though in avera of having relation with a single woman, if he did that ever in his life, the water won't work on her. And then, like the Maimer Gemara, according to the Gemara says like this: if a person is guilty of adultery, his wife is also guilty of adultery. They usually go together. People say, if he's involved in a mushal, they say, if he takes certain vegetables, big ones, she'll take small ones, which means min echadu. That means they both the same category. They both say the same thing, do the same thing. One is the big ones, one is small ones. So Rashi said what that means is whatever he's involved in, she will also be involved in. Kumtu comes out as when the anhogas if it's a woman that's not behaving properly, there's a big suspicion. If she's doing it, like the Gemara says, if she's doing it, he's doing it. So there's a big suspicion that he's doing it too. If he's doing it, the water won't work. That's why that's what the Tana of the Mishnah says, as an azafal, a fal where you see she's immoral, also lekanis. Not only might not help. If you suspect the water won't help, you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to warn her and have her become a saita. Why? Suspicion is that probably won't work for his wife anyway. So why is it osir? So it won't work. And if he'll do it and it won't work, it'll be a big avere. Because one of the things you do to her, you write certain parsha on a scroll, and you erase, and it has Hashem's name, you erase it into the water and you give her to drink. Imagine erasing Hashem's name, it's a big avere. But the Eibishter said that in order to help Shalom Bayis, I allow my name to be erased. But if you suspect it's not going to work anyway, then you got a big avere of erasing Hashem's name. Another problem, what's gonna come out, they'll say, oh, it's a joke. The whole Seita water doesn't work. And they say it's not even true. What Hashem said it's not true what Hashem said. Hashem said it'll work. They won't know that the reason it doesn't work is because it's his fault, because he did the same thing. So it's a big Aveda. So that's why the Tana holds that if it's a case where you suspect her, then it's also to the Mekane. But that's only if you're doing it out of suspicion. So what should he do? So what should he do if he has this suspicion? Not as all your best and Megadish sign. So divorce her. Could divorce her. So you could divorce her. And we don't pass him like Vishama that you're not allowed to divorce. Pass him like Basila, so you're allowed to divorce and do that. But the Osir. But when the Machlekes is Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, whether it's a mitzvah, chayva, or reshus, that's in the case where it's not suspicious. It's only we do it out education of the wife. Apikol Omer is Pashani for what the Rambam learned by Mesichta Seita kum noch Gittin. Now this will explain why Seita comes after Gittin. Question in the beginning was, why does the Rambam learn a Seita comes after Gittin, not after Nozir? We tried to say it follows the Yerushalmi. The Rebbe said that doesn't answer the question completely. So with that, we left with that question. Now we'll understand it. Now that we came and we said that the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Seita, is talking not by Stama, a person who's Makana, his wife, who's a kosher wife. It's talking about who's Makana, warns his wife, who's not so good, she's behaving immoral. That's what we said. A Seita who's sinning, because that's why it's Osir, we said. It makes sense. So it makes sense that when the Gemara says that the reason why Nozir and Seita are next to each other, the Gemara said, because if you see a Seita in her kilkul, I don't even know how to say the word in English. Kilkul means her bad things that happening. So normally we learn, what do we mean that when you see a Seita, the kilkula, you should stay away from wine. Make yourself a Nozir to stay away from wine. So Rasha says it means you see how she's dying, you see how disgusting it is. Because if it works on her, you see it. So the kilkul that the Gemara says you see, which should make you get scared and stay away from wine, it shouldn't happen to you, is the disgusting of when you see what's happening to her. It says her thigh will fall and her stomach will plots and all these things. The Rambam doesn't learn like that, the Rebbe says. When it says if you see a Seita, the kilkul is need kipirish Rasha b'nivula b'beishta, not in her embarrassment and her disgust, nor with the pashtas haloshen. The simple ocean. They're kilkul from a Seita achitas. Kilkul means she did an Aveda. If you see a Seita who did an Aveda, she is mekalkul never an Aveda. Mekalkul means she's spoiling, she's doing something wrong. So you see her Aveda or they're einish, sof sabitna. See, you see the Aveda and you see what the punishment for the Aveda is, that the stomach plots and everything else. So according to the Rambam, he says like this. He learns Pashup Shat that since the Mishnah is talking about a Seita which is a sinner before she even was warned, and that's why the husband is warning her. So you could learn, if you see the kilkul of a Seita, how low a Seita could become. That's what we're talking about. Now nowadays, Rambam is talking about nowadays. So the whole chet, the word kilkul is the chet, the sin. The whole chet of her nowadays is dos yashloka vayish alligator. You could force them to divorce. There's no Seita nowadays. I mean, there's no drinking the water of Seita. So nowadays, if you see a woman misbehaving, immoral, so what do? So the only thing is to divorce. That's why Seita comes after Gittin. The Baldas binyan kilkul is echatim kanal sifalov in the kilkul, which we said before. What's the kilkul? The kilkul is the Aveda. So if you learn like Rashi, the kilkul means that you see her, how she died. So you see how she's disgusting and how she gets embarrassed. So there's nothing to do with the get. But according to the Rambam, that means that the kilkul is the fact that you see a woman who sinned. So what should I tell you? Stay away from sin. When we say you see a woman who sinned, what is the result nowadays when you see a woman who sinned? You're not sure she did it, but she's misbehaving, she's immoral. So you have to divorce her. Oh, so nowadays, so since the Gemara says that what's the connection between Seita and Nozir? If you see the kilkul of the Seita, you should not drink wine. What's the kilkul of the Seita? That you have to give her a get. The kilkul of the Seita is the fact that she did Avedas, and you have to divorce her. So the Rambam says that's why. What should it be? It should be Seita, should be next to get, and then Nozir. So he should be Nozir, Gittin, and Seita. Because Seita and Nozir and Gittin are the same thing. Because nowadays the seita is the get. And what the Gemara says that the reason Nazir is next to it is because if you see the kilkel, make yourself a Nazir, the kilkel is the Aveda of the seita, which deserves a get. That's why it goes together. And that in the Mishnah Baschol Seita Rebbe Ben Seita Ketas, and this that Rebbe was Chadish, that this whole seita, that kinui of the seita in the Mishnah, not in the Braise, is talking about one that is sinned, which means she is immoral. So the Rebbe says, this will fit to the parsha of Seita, even the Chumash. How does it fit in Chumash? Hascholas HaParsha is, the beginning of the parsha of Seita is like this. Ish, kisishta, ishtay, a man, if his wife will turn away. She'll do something against him. She'll be with another man, and she's hiding, and she becomes Tomei. That's the beginning. So the first thing the Torah mentions is, if the man sees his wife, that she's turning away, she's Mo'ala Beimal, and she was another man, and he warns her. Then the Torah first says that there's a suffix, that the person will have a spirit, and the spirit will be whether she's Tomei or not Tomei. So what do we see here? So first he starts by saying, as if it's a fact, a man sees his wife not behaving. That's the beginning. So that's the beginning of Satan. Just like in Gemara, in the Mishnah, the Rebbe learns that Pshat in the first Mishnah is that she is a chaitas, she's not behaving. And that's what the Mishnah is talking in the beginning. The Pasuk is the same thing. It starts off by a person who sees his wife is not behaving. And then first it says he doesn't know if she's guilty or not. And in them guf is even with the second Pasuk where it says that there's a suffix whether she's guilty or not, the guilt is first mentioned before not guilt. Was wir gerät früher, read der erste halbe Pasuk, wir können nicht mehr, wegen der Kino Isha, Shemotza Badvarim Churim. The first part of the Pasuk we said before, where it says he doesn't know if she's guilty or not, first it says guilty. Guilty means that he sees already that there's a strong probability that she's guilty. So we see that in the Pasuk also. So this is the way the Rambam learns Pshat in the Gemara. Rasha goes according to Zongshite. Learned that the Mishnah wegen Kinistam. Rasha doesn't learn like the Rambam that the first Mishnah is talking if you warn your wife who is immoral, etc., etc. Regular case of Kina, even a wife that you didn't see anything wrong. B'meile, so Rasha learns, therefore, learned that Seita is Achar Nozir. Seita is after Nozir, not after Gittin. Has nothing to do with Gittin, because we're not talking about a woman that if you don't warn her, you have to divorce her. See, according to the Rambam, that the Mishnah is talking about a woman who's immoral, so that's what Seita is. So if you don't do the Seita process, you have to divorce her. So Seita and Gittin go together. But according to Rasha, it's nothing. It's talking about a regular woman that you warn her because you have to train her, you have to educate her. So there's nothing to do with Gittin. So that's what Seita is only with Nozir. And the second thing Rasha learns, Shekola Reya Seita Bikakula, is a Mefarish Benivulu Bebishta. Rasha says when it says if you see a Seita in her kilkul, stay away from wine. Kilkul doesn't mean like the Rambam we said means the her Aveira. Kilkul means look what happened to her. Because it has nothing to do, it's not talking about her taking to see what her Aveira. And the third thing is that Isa Lakanis is maybe actually the Tager Vasishali, the Nibel of Fili. The Rambam says why, what we learned before, why is it also to the Mekana, your wife? The Rambam says, because if she's doing it, and we're talking about a woman who really probably she's guilty, he's doing it too, so it won't help. So that's why it's osir. Rasha doesn't say that. Rasha says, you know why it's osir? Because you'll make a machlekes. Because she'll be upset at you, even if she's innocent, and she'll turn out to be innocent, but you'll make a machlekes. Why do it? Because Rasha doesn't learn this pshat that the Mishnah is talking about a woman who is probably guilty. That's how it starts. Well, the Rambam learns like that. So according to the Rambam, we had answered all the kashas. The kasha was, why does the Rambam say that the Seita is after Gittin? Because the Rambam learns that the Mishnah that's about Seita is talking, and the beginning of the Pasuk is also talking about a woman who's guilty, and that's why you warn her. And that has to come after Gittin, because the warning is connected to a get. And the second shaila, how could the Rambam say that it's a chiyuv to warn, when in the Mishnah it says it's osir to warn? So the answer is very simple. They're talking about two different things. When the Mishnah says osir, it's talking if it's a woman who is probably guilty. So then it's osir, because probably he's also guilty, and the water won't work. But the Rambam, when he says it's a mitzvah, a regular case. When he says mitzvahs chachamim, to do a case, to train your wife, to educate your wife, and that's fine. Now we sit according to the Rambam. It's a big chiddush the Rebbe. It's mamish made the kipshat that the Mishnah is talking about a woman who is probably guilty. That nech verstehen the shaykhs von ascholas hamasichta to receive. We'll understand the connection from the beginning of the Gemara and to the end, because usually the beginning of Sichta and then go together. What's the end of Gemara Seita? The Gemara said that when a certain person passed away, there's no more yiras chet, no more people afraid of Averis. Comes Rabbi Yosef and said, don't mention the word yiras chet, because there is still yiras chet. People are still afraid of Averis. Me, Lamoshel, on himself, he said, me. That's the end. So what's the connection? Now the Rebbe said, the mittel to Messiah Zayim Sichta Seita. When we finish Mesichta Seita, the Rebbe always looks at also, it's not just finishing learning. To finish, get rid of Mesichta of a Seita. To take away the concept of a Seita. That's the end of Mesichta Seita. As only Zayim Seita Achetas. See, it starts over the Seita, a woman who is probably guilty. So when it comes to the end, you say, how do we get rid of this Seita? We shouldn't have to follow the laws of Seita. We should remember that there is a concept of Yiras Chet. Sayid learns Mesichta Seita is Messiah and V'chayse, when he learns Mesichta Seita and finishes off by saying, don't learn that there's missing Yiras Chet, because there is me. To the dark of Yiras Chet. That means by the time you come to the end, you come after you see what happened, you come to the inyan of Yiras Chet, so then there's no more possibility or probability of a Metzias of a Seita. Because the whole Metzias of a Seita, she's not Yiras Chet, she has no Yiras Shamayim. So the Mishnah says, you started off with a Seita, a woman who is a Chitaz. So I'm finishing off that how to get finished with that, rid of that, is if you have Yiras Chet. So take out that's missing Yiras Chet. There is Yiras Chet. So this is according to the way the Rambam learns it. The first Mishnah at the beginning is talking about a Seita that's Chitaz, that she's probably guilty. What about according to Rashi? Rashi could also explain the beginning and the end, the connection. Rashi learns that when the first Mishnah says about the Seita, is not talking about a Chetaz, a woman who's probably guilty, but talking about a regular kosher woman. So therefore, when the Mishnah continues what you do, that you have to, she went to hide and then you have to give her to drink, is not mutgish as a threat and Seita Chetaz. Rashi doesn't say that, it's talking specifically dafke, stressing by a woman who's sinned. But afila hitera, even if she's tired, this process goes on. Rashi says the lotion, afila hitera. Rashi says you shouldn't. Rashi explains when it says in the Mishnah, it comes out from the Mishnah, it's osir to warn. So Rashi says because you'll make an argument even if she's tired. So Rashi makes it clear that the Mishnah is talking about a woman that's tired. So there's still a connection to the beginning. Like them pirish hayidua. We know there's a famous pshat. The Rebbe brings it himself also in different sichas. In Yiras Chet. What does it mean, Yiras? The Gemara says at the end, don't mention Yiras Chet, because there is Yiras Chet. What's Yiras Chet? Yiras Chet, normally it means Yiras Shemayim. Person's afraid. Sometimes you're afraid of doing an Aveda because you're afraid of the punishment. Yiras Chet means I'm hot made and nit fan neinish. Not because you're afraid of the punishment. Yiras ho'einish, fear of the punishment. But the Chet bring that the sin will bring. Nor far dem Chet gufa. Yiras Chet means you're afraid of the Aveda. The etzem zach zeton epis was his heipich rotzim Hashem. Yiras Chet means you're afraid to do anything which is against David's will. But that inyan is mutkish b'myuchad by a seita v'seteira. That fits more to a seita that is toyer, that is good. Why? All Avedas have maneinish. All Avedas have a punishment. So by all the Avedas, the shaykhs that you're afraid of the Aveda and you're afraid of the punishment. Besides, with the exception of a woman that's toyer, that's fine, that's innocent, not guilty. And what happened to her? And if she drank and went to hide and drank, is nit nor was ihr kommt nit kanenish. Not only will she not be punished, the Radarab if kommt as Chargodl, she gets great reward. The Nix of an Izazara says she will be clean and she will have children. The Chazal Zog, and the Chazal say, Hoysi let us betzayah, whatever. Till now, if she had pain in giving birth, she will give birth easier. The Kavis, let us chorim, if she had girls, she's going to have boys. So we see that she, by her, by a Tehira, she will not get punished. She get a brocha. Von deswegen, still, darf sie bringen a mincha als kapara. She also has to bring a korban mincha to forgive. Why does she have to be forgiven? While the etzem zach was by Edith given stire, she's tired, she's fine. But the fact that she went into hiding, even if it wasn't forbidden, it's only forbidden because the husband warned her, but it's not a real forbidden way, is nitkan hanhoga heruya. It's not the proper hanhoga, not the proper behavior. By Edith dos stire. So if she did hide, even if she does it, sometimes it says in Gemara, a woman who couldn't have children, and she was a tzadekis. She went and she went into hiding and had her husband warn her, and then she drank. And we said before that if she drinks and she's stoya, she gets a bracha to have children. So she did it. So even if she does that, it's still a problem. She shouldn't have done it. It shows that she's missing yiras chet. She's missing the chira of the chet itself, because it's not after punishment. She won't. If she's innocent, she knows she won't be punished. So there's no yiras ha'inish by her. But yiras chet is. It's for not a nice thing to do. So she shouldn't have done it. So the beginning, according to Rashi, is talking by a woman who's a good woman, and he warns her. And the end says that you have to have yiras chet. That's telling the Torah. According to the Rambam, we're telling something to the woman who's guilty. Like, if you want to get finished with the guilt, so now on, she be yiras chet. And the woman who's innocent, but she still went into hiding, we tell her this also is missing yiras chet. And the far is the siyum v'gemar from Masechta Seita. That's what the end of Masechta Seita, which means the end of the concept of Seita, the real thing of not to have any form of Seita, not even a Torah. When you come to the level of realizing that there should be yiras chet, not like the Mishnah says yiras chet was bottled, but like he said, I'm here, so there's yiras chet. You have to have yiras chet, and then the Seita will come to an end. And this is Sai according to Rashi, Sai according to the Rambam. It's not an easy sicha, but it's very, after you learn the whole thing and you see how everything falls into place, it's mamish, bishmak to show Rasha and the Rambam and the Mishnah and this, the two ways of Seita made it because of. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And
This from the early years. This is your test. Those
yeah.
sichos were easier ones, the early years. This is from the earlier years.
Yeah.
Usually the earlier years were easier sichos, no?
The truth is, I'm wondering if this was a sicha vaya fabrengen, or this was a discussion the Rebbe had, because Erev Shavuos, the Rebbe would come and speak, Rabbi Yolis would come to the Rebbe Erev Shavuos and would speak to the Rebbe, and part of it, the Rebbe would make a siyum. The truth is, I can give a look right now. In a second, if you hold on 1 minute, I'll see if this is from a Fabrengen. I'll see in a second. Okay. What is this? Erev Shavuos, right?
Erev Shavuos. Erev Chag Shavuos, Tafshin Yutes.
Okay. Let's see where it is here. Pesach, I'll see. You probably will be writing it in the sicha. Here, Shabbos Mevor from Sivan, Erev Chag Shavuos. There it says here. Maybe it's a Fabrengen. No, it's very short. Maybe it doesn't say here whether he did it in shul or not. No, like if I look another place that he said it's Menachem to see. Hold on a second. Here it says, yeah, Erev Chag Shavuos. No, it doesn't say. It's very short. Very short. So I don't know. I don't remember. Doesn't say here. But that's what I'm. Anyway. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Good night, everyone.